All right, guys, it's the Crypto Sheikhs Podcast. We're live here in Dubai. I'm really happy to have a really cool guest today, Vesa. Oh, I'm here, of course, with my co-host, Big D. Danosh, how's it going, my main man?
It's all good. Really happy to have Vesa in the house. Super excited to talk to you about NFTs and see how this market will evolve over the next few years. And also your history and your background in this space. And also we have a partnership with Helicon NFT. It's a super cool gaming and NFT marketplace. So especially marketplace for gaming NFTs. And what they do is they're going to launch their own game very soon. And this whole space, NFT games is becoming more and more big. And we will see a lot of games develop where you will basically be able to earn money while you play games. So anyone interested in gaming NFTs, check out heliconnft.com.
Wonderful, wonderful.
This is the Crypto Sheikhs. This is the leading podcast in Dubai and the UAE where you, regardless of your skill level, will learn everything from cryptocurrencies to blockchain technologies.
All right, over to you, Vesa. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling super good being here, and it was so lovely to see the guitars. And you guys are sort of rock stars of the crypto space in this kind of way, so I couldn't be happier being here with you guys and looking forward to the conversation.
Vesa, the honor is all, you're the honorable guest here. I mean, we have watched you speak at a number of events, most recently at WoW Summit. For those who attended as well or who don't know about it, it's a really cool NFT event here. I think it's going to become more of an annual thing. Lots of very interesting discussions about DeFi, NFTs. But there, you made a number of very interesting revelations about a new project that you'll be doing in the sort of car space. We're going to talk about that a little later. It's really exciting. But also some other projects and some sort of philosophical aspects to the NFTs, which both of us are really interested to hear about. So why don't we dive in? I think before we sort of go into the nitty-gritty details, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story, because you're one of the earlier sort of people who I've heard of who got into NFTs back in 2017. Most people, we were sort of doing crypto trading, we're buying Bitcoin, buying Ethereum, but you were one of the first ones to think about crypto and art and the sort of marriage between those two and where that could go. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I need to tell a little bit about further even into the background stories that I started with music, and I started as a filmmaker. My first real gig or profession was a film director. I had a production company and I was a storyteller. I mean, that was what was calling me in different kinds of different forms. And back then in 2008 or so, I'd been making a few television series in Finland and things like that. And the aim was always to go to Hollywood to be an A-list film director. But all of a sudden I found myself doing these series in Finland and paying production company bills, and I kind of had a crisis of everything. And after some painful soul searching and kind of like experimenting, I got an idea that what if I started body painting on people? And I started allowing them to go through these sort of processes and help them go through a sort of journey into themselves, and how that personal journey then relates to all of our collective story as human beings. Essentially telling whole movie stories in a still frame that was sort of, I painted and I photographed the paintings and this body painting process or nature photography, and I threw it all together with Photoshop. Wow. As soon as I saw the first piece in front of me, I was like, okay, I don't want to make movies anymore. That this is it. And I jumped on board 2008 full time into this, and I became a digital artist ever since then. And I've had digital originals, which is now about 350 of them, and I've been hodling them ever since up until here. So, and at that time, right before it, in 2006 or so, I saw some documentary films about the monetary system, and I realized that this is one of the biggest problems of humanity, is that we have an archaic system that sort of is robbing the wealth from the bottom to the top in a kind of way, in a debt-based thing that feels like modern slavery in so many different ways. And people just don't understand how money works for many reasons. And so I put my production company funds and resources behind it for a full year, and we produced a film that told the Finnish public, and with our own experts and individuals, of how the thing works and what could be potential solutions.
Wow.
But This wasn't very great for many reasons.
Yeah,
because
I can imagine. This was 2009, 2008?
2009 and 10, we made the film and released it.
Right when the financial crisis sort of happened, Bitcoin was still just getting created at the time. So you were very early with this philosophy of, decentralized money, this idea that centralized banking was a problematic concept. Very early in that thinking.
You must have been stirring up a lot of shit. Creating a lot of havoc by having those ideas. Because I remember I graduated in 2009 during the financial crisis, and I was like, what the hell is going on with all this money printing? That's when I started to get interested in, what caused the financial crisis and how do you avoid it next time. And the money printing didn't rhyme well with how I understood that you would solve financial problems. So it was just crazy, like what was happening in the markets. And anyone that had a kind of controversial idea, people like Peter Schiff, they were laughed at, back then.
Of course.
And I can just imagine if you came out with that type of information, what kind of backlash you would have gotten.
So let's hear a little bit about that.
No, well, once we released it out, Finland is only about 5 million people, and we got something like 300,000 downloads. So if you double that to the family members or whatever, we made half the country sort of aware of what was going on in a certain kind of way. But the solutions of what we were building, because there's a magical guy called Jacques Fresco he had this thing called the Venus Project and how to redesign society, and we don't need money anymore and whatever. So, but that was kind of like, it was true that the critique of that movement, the sort of zeitgeist thing,
that was the last zeitgeist movie, right?
Yeah, or the second and the third.
Yeah.
Both of them had Jacques Fresco in it. But it was proposing another centralized solution, kind of like a communist solution up and on the layer of something that was missing spirituality. Any kind of spiritual concept was void. And I hung out with Jacques Fresco for four days in Stockholm.
Oh, wow.
And even though I was so anticipating to meeting this guy, and he's such a genius, and I use that word very, very rarely. I have such a respect for that word, but he's in that category. But he's also on the spectrum to the level that he also thought that music is also only something that is valuable if you enhance a scene in a movie or something like that. He didn't see a point to music at all. Yeah. So this is the kind of level of narrow expertise that he had, but he made a beautiful blueprint on top of something that life can be built upon. But, because if you listen to someone like Michael Saylor and you look at all of a sudden money as energy. So now, or Andreas Antonopoulos, when he talks about,
Just so you know, guys, Michael Saylor, he's the CEO of MicroStrategy, and one of the biggest holders of Bitcoin in the sort of corporate world.
3.3 billion now in value or something like that. So there was a level of humanity, like understanding about human beings and our trade value and things like that we're missing from it, that we can now maybe take some of his concepts and build upon it with crypto. The problem was that when you didn't have crypto to advocate, you had a sort of negative energy about you. It was a downward spiral about critiquing something, but you can't really replace it with anything that like the 20th century was an experiment in horrible centralized systems.
Yes.
And then when we were trying to give some idea that we could try maybe something like that again, obviously it doesn't catch on fire, and it was a kind of negative vibe about it all. So when in 2017, finally, I went for a coffee with a friend of mine who just sort of said that by the way, I'm in Bitcoin, and I was actually trying to find an art piece on my wall as a trader. But I couldn't find anything good enough on my wall, and he knew my story very well, and he just sort of said, Vesa, I think you better look into it. And as I did that day, and because he introduced me to Andreas Antonopoulos, I started listening to him, and I lost my ability to sleep for 4 months.
That's incredible.
No, I went so hard into it because it was such a multi-level thing that it was positive money. It was going to open up the arteries of the world in a financial way. It was also all of a sudden the 350 artworks that I had done, or it was less then, but regardless, they can become, the digital originals can finally become a market force. Because in one way, even though I had critical backing, I'd done artworks that reached hundreds of millions of people. I'd done all of these kinds of things that were sort of art world proof. But my originals, which was what people were always after to kind of energize, were digital files.
Yeah.
So I kind of was in a halfway house with that in a transition phase. I felt like a round thing trying to go into a square thing in the legacy art world. But then in the beginning of NFTs, it was also like the quality really wasn't that great.
Yes.
And people were crypto traders. They understood sort of collectibles. And they whatever, but there was no...
There's a very nerdy vibe to the community.
Yeah.
I mean, there still is.
And again, on the spectrum, and I say that lovingly because I am also a little bit in the whole thing. But there was no one who pretty much understood how to analyze the substance of the art itself.
Very interesting.
And that was the sort of catalyst to everything. So I'm still, for the majority of my art pieces, I'm still hodling them. I haven't minted, but now, and especially here in Dubai, now the professionals are coming in so many different ways who have the capacity to know evaluate the career and the contribution culturally of the artist, to what the substance of their art is, and kind of start doing the...
Let's talk about that, because this is something a lot of people in the audience definitely want to know. So how do you evaluate an art piece, from if I were to become or want to become an NFT collector, how would you describe the evaluation of an art piece in the space?
Well, if you think of someone like, for me, when I was a kid, I saw a couple of paintings by Dali. It blew my mind, and all of a sudden a new universe was born inside of my mind. Then someone who comes and imitates Dali after that, they might have substance in the artwork, but they're not the ones who opened up that portal of imagination. So if you think that, for example, because people are still like, oh, it's not a physical thing, I can't touch it, it's not oil paint or whatever. Oil paint is technology. It's just a very old technology.
I love that.
We don't think of it.
Yeah. That's a great statement.
We don't think
oil
of it
paint
as...
is technology. And just like blockchain is a new form of technology which can be used to create art as well.
Yeah, that's a great way to see it.
But crypto art for me was something that I came in to support the hard money movement. Because if you look at the history of what's happened with art for the past 50 years, it's that when in 71 Richard Nixon took out the gold standard from underneath the dollar, that's about the moment when Andy Warhol came into prominence.
Can I just pause you there, just for the audience? Hard money, this is a concept that we talk about in crypto. Maybe the audience doesn't understand. Hard money is a reference to money that is backed by something. So in the olden days, money was backed by gold, and you referenced that in 1971, Nixon. So gold was backed by money. It was considered hard money or ultrasound or sound money because you had a value behind that money that was limited in supply, i.e. gold, right? Now we live in a fiat world where money isn't hard anymore, i.e. you can print unlimited amounts of it. So just wanted to highlight that point for the audience.
Yeah. The only thing right now that would be limited in supply is Bitcoin.
Yes, Bitcoin and
some of the other
Ethereum
cryptos,
to an extent as well. All right, back to you, Vesa. Sorry.
No, yeah, back then Andy Warhol started his literal factory. He started making screen prints, and he sort of was almost like the lineage of art. If you think of what are the two oldest forms of art, is body painting or cave painting.
Yeah.
First, we did something on the caves. To leave out some message, leave something behind from us or whatever. But with body painting, what we did is that we tried to transform our consciousness. Like maybe you experimented with some strange mushrooms that you saw as, whatever, and you painted yourself with mud and tried to find yourself in the Milky Way galaxy or something like that evolved then into the temples and spirituality and transcendence and the Egyptian grand achievements of what they have, or from the Vedic texts or whatever. They've always art and this sort of energetic power has been coincided like this. So what Warhol did is that he started critiquing this consumerist culture and these snarky cans and whatever. But Warhol was the first one to have this sort of jet set class of rich people, and also a kind of political commentary that is from the very narrow bandwidth. And that is the only place where art has been for the past 50 years.
That's why it has a snobby kind of vibe to it, because he's brought that rich elite, and then it's also maybe the sort of artistic types who sort of appreciate that, and the traditional art world has that kind of vibe to it. It's very interesting to see how the NFT world has began to change that a little bit by bringing people who traditionally wouldn't be into art
and
into
making
the space.
It worse too. No, but Andy Warhol sort of forked then into like the let's say, the Jeff Koons and the Damien Hirst and the sort of jet set class of magnificent things. And some of it I'm a great fan of. Some of it is amazing, but it's still sort of this sexy death category in one way. And then it's Ai Weiwei, and it's sort of leftist political propaganda and against the empire and all those kinds of things. So they're forked. But that's the bandwidth. You can't, before at least crypto art, and why I thought crypto art was so fascinating is that maybe my substance, which was all of a sudden going all the way back to the cave painting and body painting days, going to why I think, the Renaissance of Italy and the Sistine Chapel, those pieces of what they were trying to communicate was a function. There's a function that art has that is meant to transform your consciousness, that it's meant to do something for you, to help you on the journey of this whole point of discovery. But none of that has been allowed it's been haram in the in the last 50 years of art. So I came into crypto art to support the new money movement, but also have the freedom to comment upon something that I see as the continued evolution of art, that we've had a little bit of a hiccup of late. Because you look at academia, you look at our institutions, you look at many things, and they all coincide with what started to happen in 1971, when eventually in the 90s our sort of growth stagnated in the global economy. So I thought that what a dream to be here at this moment in time to start talking about this and support it with art, benefit from all the people that felt like family to me once I started hanging out with crypto people, because it was like they weren't entrepreneurs only. They weren't only about the bottom line. They wanted to find solutions to the world, but they had resources, they had intelligence, they had education. I tried hanging out with the hippies. I love the vibe of the 26,000 year cycles, talking about the pyramids, going into all of these spiritual concepts or whatever. But the majority of them were sitting around in a drum circle, kind of wishing it was better. They didn't have the means and methods
the
of
execution.
making. Yeah, but those kinds of people are also in crypto. So it's such a whole package of what kind of people are in this space, and it's sort of this polymathic thing. And I just really find myself to be very comfortable here. It's not only about business or art; it's about friends.
So, what type of people do you think are not into crypto?
Centralized bankers, obviously.
Yeah, but they're buying. But
no, I think it's probably a number of people who find this system a threat to their existing way of life, in my view. But they don't understand it. I think there's two groups: the people who find this a threat. So we've had this before, where we've been in discussions with bankers who think the crypto market is, just a bunch of money launderers, etc. This is the usual thing that they say. You have that group, but then you also have the people who just don't understand it at all. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast, right? To try to help those people understand it and then maybe come into the space and be part of that community as well.
So you basically, from a philosophical standpoint, you started with, educating yourself about the financial world and the financial markets.
Yeah.
But your roots are in art. How do you combine those two? Because you're a big proponent of decentralization, and giving freedom to everyone. How do you see those things merge?
And also maybe on top of that question, connected, maybe you can talk a little bit about your art, the inspiration for it, which I think is linked to, Danosh's question.
All right, sure. I mean, it's in terms of, like, for example, substance. I was just in this meeting where I was showing this one artwork that I made in 2018, I think, was with, it's called Lakshmi Resurrection. So Lakshmi is the Hindu goddess of health and wealth. And I made it in collaboration with my fiancée, and it was a really cool thing. She meditates and connects with that world, and she helped me do it emotionally correctly as well, from the way that how she's connected with it and saw it. So, but the inspiration from it came from the whole idea of what Andreas Antonopoulos was the first one to make me aware, is that there's 3.5 billion people in the world without a bank account. And the places where the government currencies are most unstable is where crypto is most important. And of course, India is banning it left or right and center, and China, whatever. But I thought, so what would be the good way to somehow assist this particular case? Because India has been as a journey with me for many different kinds of reasons. So I took the concept of Lakshmi and her sort of likeness, And it's all the value symbols. It's all gold, platinum, silver, whatever. And she's giving healing from her left hand and then raining gold from her right hand as she's traditionally presented. But this time she's raining down Bitcoin.
That's cool.
Yeah, because the whole idea is that if it's accepted into the divine portfolio of value, then whoever is after that kind of thing and recognizes the thousands of years of tradition of Lakshmi, and then that's sort of now become a blessing of a thing that you might want to pay attention to. That's what I can do art with and go into that community and talk about what I've done. And I'm sure not everyone is going to be fantastically happy about it, because some of that is going to have some controversy.
So is that kind of where you see your personal art going? It's the kind of art which speaks a little bit about, one, the financial system, the existing financial system, and how it can be addressed or fixed by crypto, and maybe some of the other philosophies that underpin.
Yeah, I mean, the most important person that I came across in my early life, in my early 20s, was called Ken Wilbur. He's the father of integral theory. It's this guy who's recommended by the top world leaders and the Wachowski brothers, now sisters, when they go and talk about art and spirituality and kind of like the spearhead of something. They go to the Integral Institute in Boulder, Colorado. And essentially, his method of looking at the whole evolution of the individual, the collective, religions, societies, or whatever, he's put them into a complete sort of map where you can find yourself in. So he taught me and how to start thinking about creativity, that you always have to have multiple points of view working with as a holistic whole in order to make true impact with this whole thing. So that's the philosophy on how I kind of approach
Love it.
Creativity.
And you use mixed media. You're a digital artist, but you also use sort of paint, and I've seen some of your works. It's a number of different things that you use, right?
It's a genuine pain because most people now still think that I'm a traditional painter, because I use paint and digitized paint. It looks like it could be a piece. They don't recognize it as digital art as clearly as you can recognize something that is made by glass grain or someone, because it's so distinctly. But this is the whole thing. It's like even with phenomenal digital artists like Android Jones or someone, he has the amazing perspective and evolution of humanity in his artworks or whatever, but they're generated out of pixels only. And there's something for me when I look at his work, even though it's magnificent, there's something that is missing from it for me to land into my heart. It sort of leaves me in my headspace because it's made out of pixels. So this is why I kind of, well, for me, the evolution was that I started body painting on people because I didn't know how to paint at the beginning of my early career, so that I would get the bodies in correct proportion, or that was the whole idea. That was the innovation, that if I body paint on someone, I can direct them like in a film. I can capture that. I can play with paint and do macro photography and test things out. And maybe I can come up with something that looks like a legit painting.
That must have been a lot of fun in the studio doing the body paintings. What's your most like fun story about doing a body painting? Do you have like a crazy story?
No, I'd say one of my favorite stories, and I think it sets the tone a little bit, because right now, body painting is mostly associated with, let's say, American football stadiums where bimbos have their boobs as, and then they're selling beer or whatever. But one of the favorite stories at the beginning of this whole thing is I made a process with a girl called Emily, a very beautiful young woman, like both in physical and spirit. And I got to know her story. I met her in Thailand when I was there for a holiday. And I got to hear her story is that she'd backed up a loan by her then previous boyfriend, who then sort of did some bad business deals, and she ended up with the debt of the guy, and they'd split up, and she was like selling makeup on at a mall or something like that to cover some of those debts, and she was really sad, and she was quite downtrodden by this whole thing. So we made this artwork called Adanda, which was the whole process. That first I asked her to, in the body paint, sort of go into the feeling of how she actually feels, and she sort of hunched and turned to the camera in a way, and she embodied that energy of being like how she felt. And then I gave her this, I'd sourced from a friend of mine who's this sort of classic boat captain, interesting dude. He has a band called Drunks with Knives, and it's just a character. But I asked for some thick sort of boat rope that I brought to the studio, and then I gave that rope to her, and I asked her to start fighting the feeling that she had to liberate herself from that whole thing. And she was crying so hard that there was snot coming out of her nose and whatever. So she was hardly self-conscious at that moment of, oh, I better be a beautiful, something, and how do my boobs look in this and whatever. No, she fought it off. And then when I thought that it was done, she then asked me for a ladder. I was like, okay, so we got this. And she said, no, it's not done yet. And she wanted a ladder, and I happened to have it in my home studio. She brought it to where the thing was, and she sort of went up and started reaching for the ceiling. And somehow I felt in the studio as the energy moved, and whatever was entrapped in her was released. And then I captured that. And that's the 3-piece thing that is in that one artwork.
Wow. That's a really interesting piece. And I love the story behind it as well. Wow. All right, I want to switch this discussion to something a little bit more futuristic now, because I've seen some of the pieces that you do which integrate AR. I saw this one at WoW Summit, which was really inspiring. But even more interesting, perhaps, is this new project that you talked about at WoW Summit involving vehicles. Yeah. So for those who saw some of our stories on the Crypto Sheikhs podcast, there was a Tesla and another vehicle that I think you had done some NFT where you had wrapped the car in a beautiful design.
It was not just a Tesla; it was a sick-ass Tesla.
It was a sick-ass Tesla, and this Tesla is actually owned by a very interesting person here, Dr Marwan, who is the CEO of the Dubai Blockchain Center. And you talked about how this car, you've NFT'd it and brought it into sort of the virtual world, into the metaverse. Let's talk a little bit about that, because this is an innovation that I really haven't seen anywhere else.
Yeah, it is. In the way that we packaged it, it's the first in the world for sure. I mean, there was one NFT car, Porsche, I think, that I saw in the Miami crypto experience that was done earlier in the year. But the origin of this story is that in 2014, I made a concept idea, because I'm a big fan of Elon Musk and Tesla and everything, and I wanted to make an art car. So I had this in my phone as a picture, the concept, for like years and years, and sometimes I showed it to someone and whatever. And then when I came to Dubai about a year ago for the first time, for the first Future Blockchain Summit, and I was kindly introduced to Dr Marwan, among the many conversations that we had, I just showed him this picture of this car. And then a couple of months later, he said, "Do you want to hop on a Zoom call, Vesa?" I was like, "Yes, of course. What's up?" And he said, "Yes, Vesa, I've bought 17 cards now, and we're going to make them into NFTs, and we need to discuss this."
Wow, that's really crazy.
So now the project has 55 cars, a Russian tank, and a jet.
What? There's a Russian tank?
Yeah. Well, it's been negotiated.
It's an NFT'd Russian tank.
Yes, it's the one that was at WoW Summit, but we're going to wrap that in. We're going to wrap it in art now as well.
That's
cool. Unreal. I love
Are you gonna have a body paint that girl on top of that tank as well?
If we bring it to Dubai, then I might have to rethink the concept, because.
But let's talk a little bit about how this works. So, from what I understand, you purchase the NFT on the blockchain, you get the car along with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, just to go to the provenance, and even this is important to know the very foundation of this. Like you said, Dr. Marwan is the CEO of the Dubai Blockchain Center, and he's very well integrated
Connected
into
here,
the whole thing. CZ is his personal friend, whatever, but he's also doing things right. He's a genuine nerd. He actually hacked the first iPhone.
I've played Catan with him at a get-together. Yeah, he's really into board games. I love him. Great guy.
He really understands the technology. He finds it really important to educate, what other people would consider the dumbest question in the room. That's the one that he will really go deep in. And then sort of people along the way realize that maybe they've not understood it as profoundly as they might have thought of. So sometimes he just has this beautiful attitude. But it's his Tesla, so it's his personal 2017 Tesla. It's the first one that we wrapped. But also what is important to understand about this is that it was illegal to make such a car here before we started this project.
It was illegal?
Yeah, you could only have a car here that was made in 4 different colors.
Oh, wow.
So then he went to all the appropriate...
They pulled some strings.
Yeah, pulled some strings. And now it's possible to make an art car like that.
Wow. That is so cool.
So it's the first in Dubai. He pioneered a new path for car making in Dubai.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
love
now
it. What a Chad.
The Tesla is the first one. And then it's wrapped in unique art piece, the digital piece of mine. It will be a one of one ever made into an NFT, which is called Compound Defiance. It actually has an Ethereum logo embedded in a kind of very sort of subtle way all across the card.
So the design is a number of Ethereum-based logos that you've put around the car.
But it's sort of because it's the birth of DeFi, and it's kind of the first DeFi car in the way that we do it, because it's so what the car is a literal vehicle for is to the metaverse, because we're also making it into a virtual reality version of that car.
Yeah, this is so exciting.
And we're going to build a world. First, it's probably going to be a garage or something. So in the same vein as what you'd have with Bored Apes Yacht Club or something, that it's kind of a club that you have access to.
It's a community. It's a community. You buy one of these cars, you can also meet other people as within that community.
Yeah, because it's a very exclusive community, because not everyone's going to be able to afford these cars.
Yeah, so the minimum price would probably be about $300,000 just to even get in. Maybe more. Maybe more. All right, a little more than that.
No, because if you think of the foundation, I mean, it's a 2017 Tesla. It's probably about 35, 40,000 or something like that, the car value. But then it's the digital artwork. Then it's the access to the club. Then it's a virtual reality version. And I'm also an art ambassador for Shisha Finance for Saeed Al-Darmaki. So one thing that I thought that would be actually quite cool is maybe we're going to take some Shisha tokens and lock them into the deal of the NFT.
Wow.
Oh, wow,
and then that's staked for 5 years.
So Saeed is actually the real crypto sheikh.
Yeah.
We would actually love to have both Dr. Marwan and Saeed on the show
podcast,
at some point.
We will.
I'm happy to introduce both.
But I want to talk a little bit more about this.
Them already.
Let's talk a little bit more about this. So how does this all work? Maybe you could how does so let's say I become the owner of this NFT. And let's say I purchase it from Dr. Marwan. He's happy to sell it. I buy it from him. So I own the Tesla. I also own the digital representation of that Tesla, i.e. the NFT, in the metaverse, which is then usable in the metaverse that you're also looking to create a game of some sort, right? And then the car also has DeFi tokens locked into it, which I guess only gets unlocked so that I can get the yield once a given period has
held
elapsed.
on to it for 5 years at least. So the general principle is this: the way that we're going to sell, because even if you buy a $2 million Lamborghini, when you drive it out the shop, it's 30-40% less. So
because of the depreciation, yes.
Because a car is hardly a great investable asset.
It's not even really a good investment at all.
Right. So it's
just a vanity purchase.
Yeah, right. So we're inverting the car value pyramid. Because the way that we're going to sell the first one, the Tesla, because the provenance of Marwan, the fact that it's the first legal car to be able to, the DeFi tokens and the access to the VR game that we're building, is that when we're doing this, the first one we're selling with Gustavo, who's a former Swiss banker, and he has access to some very interesting platforms and very secluded sort of private auction places, is that the minimum bid for the Tesla is going to be 1 million.
Wow. That's crazy.
All right. Wow.
So this is what you can do with art when you kind of, because it's then no longer a vehicle. But what it is that because for most people still they find this whole world pretty
confusing
and whatever, and the metaverse, what is it? So it's the physical car is going to be, you can drive it and you can sort of flex with it on JBR if you want to.
It's an art piece, basically.
It's an art piece. And essentially what it's driving you to is the metaverse, because how I see it, the ultimate point of value there is the actual 3D render of that car and what it gives you access to. And the car is just something that starts, even though it looks pretty cool, I think, it's just something that takes you to, as an education almost, to the value of it all.
So you mentioned that you like Elon Musk. Is this your SpaceX project into the metaverse?
In a way.
You said it.
In a way, right? Right? That should be your slogan.
I want to explore this a little more. So
plus, can I say this?
Go ahead.
Before, because also what I found so inspiring, because I'm sure that along the way that because we're partnering with Binance now, Binance Futured Marketplace, to sell some of these cars. It's going to get accused as being a super elitist club. It's just super rich people, this and that and whatever, just a flex and whatever. But what I found so inspiring about the Elon Musk story is that he had to first build the Roadster. He had to first energize it to make it the fastest car or something like that in order to people to pay attention to it and find the liquidity for the whole project. And then, but the plan all along was to get to the affordable models. To underlying structure change of the whole of the sort of how we
So
move
this
about
is a
in the world.
roadmap potentially down, and you foresee that this will eventually become more affordable for everyday people to also be part of this community.
That's the plan. The plan is to build essentially on, because the underlying thing is that, like Andreas Antonopoulos kindly made me aware, not personally, but in videos, but I met him and he signed this one artwork that we can maybe discuss as well at some point, but which is still the coolest for me in that whole thing. But it's, if you have 3.5 billion people who don't have a bank account, but you have, even in remote villages in Africa, you have cell phone towers, and most people are starting to have cell phones all over the world. If they can have access to some laptops, even disposable ones, they can create new virtual economies. They can now with NFTs own land in the metaverse.
Like
they
Decentraland.
They can use, design sneakers, do whatever it is. What does the world look like that all of a sudden half the world's population is going to come into the creative digital space, hopping over the industrial revolution, and kind of like, and what this leads to is that we know that societies that are doing the best on the planet take care of their environment the best. We have all of these different kinds of crises all across the world, and many of them have to do with poverty or fight for resources and kind of means to take care of our surroundings. So what if the metaverse is the place through which we actually elevate the bottom of the financial sort of layer people of the whole of the world, and we get to start, tackling some of the issues like climate change and things like that. So it's a counterintuitive way to get into something that won't consume the planet's resources, but all of a sudden actually brings people up. So,
I love it.
And so this is the scope of things that I'm thinking of this with. And even though we start with this very seclusive club, that is the plan of what I'm at least building towards.
So what's interesting is you mentioned Jack Fresco in the beginning, the guy that had the Venus project, and his idea basically was to give access to food, to finance, not finance, because he completely takes out money out of the equation, but he's saying that the whole world can be self-sustainable with technology. And with technology, we can distribute food efficiently. We can distribute everything that people need efficiently, and everyone will be able to survive and have a good life because there is enough resources on the planet. So do you think that in terms of a separate financial world now created by Bitcoin and all these other cryptocurrencies, that this enables, it seems like what you're saying is that this metaverse would enable all the people that today are locked out from the traditional financial systems would now get access to it?
Eventually, yeah, it'll be a lot better. If you look at society from the 1800s, even those who were the best to do from that part of society, they're worse off in their living standards in many ways than many poor people around the world are now. So there's some sort of a thing that is happening. But then there's another interesting thing because when I used to look at the world in a certain way, that I looked at it as only a problem to be solved in some ways, that, we can make everything better. But if you look at the living standards of Americans, for example, for a long time, it didn't, even though they had a lot of financial abundance and things and maybe started getting less and less challenges, that didn't necessarily make them happier people. All of a sudden you have obesity problems, you have all different kinds of things. So I think planet Earth, if you look at it from a spiritual point of view, is kind of like a school for the soul. And it's not meant to be solved. It's meant to be problematic. And sometimes, I'm sure you've felt it too, that you solve one problem and then another one pops up somewhere else. This is how this whole place is designed. So it's like, it's a balance thing. Like in crypto art, people at the beginning phase, everyone was saying, yeah, we're just going to cut out all the middlemen, screw the centralized model, and all the sort of leeches on it and whatever. But this is why now, because you cut out all the middle people, from the expertise of art, and people just wanted to reinvent the wheel of the whole of the art world in the crypto space again. This is why such an amount of those NFTs are going to zero, because many of the hype investments of the early phase were that there were no expertise from the people who would have maybe understood that what are the factors that made sustainable value happen in the art world for thousands of years.
So I want to just wrapping up this interview now, but I think to bring some value as well to the audience, as a newcomer, if you have people in the audience who are new to this world, so many in our audience probably understand Ethereum, they understand traditional cryptocurrencies, but they want to explore the NFT space. Obviously, some of them probably are FOMOing about the huge valuations and the money that's being made, 10x, 20x, 30x. What would you say, honest advice to these, to these potential, people who want to get into the space? How would you say they explore the NFT world or crypto art generally and get in?
Especially now that Coinbase, they opened up NFTs to all their users. So they have a new NFT marketplace, which is they have 60 million users already. And today there's like 170,000 wallets, NFT wallets. So, that's going to give a huge mainstream adoption. And, I think this is an important question that you're asking.
Yeah, definitely. What are your thoughts on that?
One thing that calms down people a little bit when they hear the word NFT is like when I hear someone says, hey, I've got this NFT. What I hear is, I have a receipt. I'm like, cool. What does it point to? What does it do? Like many of the cultural aspects, like we were talking about Dali, and he opened up a point of consciousness or something like that. I actually think that one of the most interesting things for me is the internet memes that are being tokenized at the moment. Because they did sort of the same thing as to what Dali did. They're all of a sudden open up a kind of conversation. Everyone knows the meme, so it kind of has value. It's done something, and it's part of the history, and it's helping it evolve. Now, you could argue that CryptoKitties is something like that as well, and many things, but I think it's sort of like an age of illustrators right now, and it's so much more about the frame that it is what is on the inside of the frame, or it might be an access to the club or something like that, but most of those are fads, in my humble opinion. I think it's now really, really cool to have your profile pic as something like a Bored Ape Yacht Club, but I might be wrong, and if I might have to eat my words later. But I'm not sure if in 4 years it's going to be cool anymore, even if it points to a lot of money for you to have a Bored Ape as your profile picture.
Why do you say that?
In general, because there's so many new ones coming that keep innovating with their technology and their access and building on top of value, whatever. So I wouldn't have much advice for the collectible space. I understand why CryptoPunks are what they are. It's early in. It's sort of now a complete status symbol to have it. And it means you have a lot of money. You were early in it. It's kind of this thing. But when I look at the thing itself, it doesn't have any intrinsic value whatsoever. Like, how can you distinguish between the 10,000 different punks? And why is one all of a sudden valued at 8 million? And this leads to maybe some questions about legitimacy of some of those trades as well. And, and whatever, without going further into it.
What about the art? Because you are an artist that produces NFT art as well. What about, the non-collectible space? Because I'm sure that people... So I've bought actual sort of legitimate, art on Foundation. And I'm very happy to have, supported some artists there. Some of the pieces I think I hold now have gone up in value because the artist himself has managed to grow his following or his community. So one of the earlier questions I asked you in terms of evaluation, it's difficult. It's not like crypto where you have, maybe some, like there's more demand for it, and therefore that maybe causes the value to go up. I mean, in the NFT world, it's difficult to sort of price that. There's no graph for, a a fine art piece that has been NFT'd. How would I'm curious, how are you thinking about this in terms of, do you think, if someone is new to the space, they should just buy what they like? Or do you think if they're looking at it from an investment perspective, there's some other criteria that really kind of comes into play?
Well, a lot of the investments are now made, even in the art space, which I think is asked backwards, is that people are looking to flip them as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And I don't think
unfortunately.
I don't think it's a sustainable thing. I understand why people do it. And it's sometimes that can be good for the artists as well as the collectors, and the whole thing grows. But it's the whole thing. It's a receipt. So what does it point to? Is the artwork great? What is the artist's contribution? What is their careers? What has the art impacted the culture in some sort of a way? Will it have some sustainability behind it? And do you like it? It's like, art is a difficult business, and most people don't really have that kind of background to evaluate what's on the inside of it. But if you spend some time in the communities and spend some time looking at them, not only as the artworks, but the artists themselves and what they're doing, you will have a better navigation. It's like when you get into crypto. It's like every moon cycle, friends and family members and cousins and whoever all of a sudden is your best friend because they want to now throw their money into Bitcoin now that it's like 60K as opposed to 10K when you told them about it. It's the same sort of, and I think because of all of this phenomena, it's soon going to have a bear market, and I welcome it. I think it's awesome that it's coming.
Time to buy in.
Yeah, it's time to buy in, but it's also people will have to learn the hard way of how not to FOMO and why not to FOMO.
Yeah.
And then again, it's like when the bear market is here, it's less crazy. That's when a new legion of professionals are going to come in and help the whole thing. And they're maybe going to make platforms that solve the problem of whether the bids are legit or not, or all of these kinds of things that we need as solutions to carve out the different avenues in order to make it sort of the centralized or decentralized conversation is like, what I'm looking at is efficiency. And sometimes if you have an ideology of a centralizer, you miss out on efficiency that decentralization gives, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I think what I try to represent in my art and my life philosophy is balance. And this kind of thing to optimize things to the best of their qualities. I mean that's wonderful.
Danosh, anything from you?
No, I mean, I would just say that, what's interesting about the NFTs is that it's made me more interested in actual art, because before I thought art was really boring. Honestly, I thought it was super boring.
Straight up.
I hated to go to museums because I didn't understand it. But then I started to actually read into some of the stories of the artists, and then suddenly it became more interesting. But now with NFTs, because I got drawn into it, it made now I'm looking at traditional art and I find it really, really interesting. So do you think that NFTs in general has benefited the art world as a whole?
Yeah, because the legacy art world, as I lovingly now call it, and they're probably very pissed that I do.
Do you call it
if they listen to me at all?
Can we say trad art?
No, but they were so behind in innovation and creativity, and it was such a stagnant thing. I think you're able to be much more innovative at IBM corporate headquarters than you were in the art world before. So and now the legacy system is following, because they were so money driven for so long, and they didn't care about the innovation. They didn't invest into innovation in so many different kinds of ways. They were just doing the same repetitive thing for the most part, even the top galleries of the world. So now that they're forced to this innovation cycle, of course they benefit, but also crypto people, because now some of the expertise that was in the legacy system is coming here. So again, the efficiency will increase. But this is I keep hodling, like I say, that there's still not, the integration is not fully there. So I do different kinds of experiments. Like one of the things that what we're doing with Superworld, for example, right now is this augmented reality VR world.
Oh yeah, I've used them.
So essentially with their team for a year, we've built the Temple of Luxor into a virtual reality version that is becoming my gallery.
Amazing.
And it's spectacular. Wow. I'm so happy that is happening.
So you can bring your phone out, just to explain to the audience. I've used this app before, and you take your phone out and you can visualize an NFT in a given geographical location, right? And on your phone, so it looks like it's right there in front of you. I can't wait to see how this integrates with VR one day. So I know Snapchat are coming out with their VR glasses, and they did a little thing with Artifact where you wear these glasses and you can visualize NFTs on people's bodies in the world generally. It's kind of like that Pokemon Go game, which went crazy for many people, because so I love how NFTs are and AR, all these different technologies are coming together to create a new kind of, this is the metaverse, right? This is the definition of the metaverse.
But also, it's like the philosophy underneath that. And I made this experiment, like the Grand Pyramid of Giza on CryptoVoxels before with an artist called Ogar, is that because if you went to a high power gallery in London or something like that, it's big, vast white walls and a kind of like makes you stiff when you go in there and whatever, and it's a certain kind of thing. I thought, well, how to make a gallery, like, because I'm so inspired by Egypt and all of these different kinds of things. So it could be the pyramid. That would be cool.
Yeah.
And then it could have secret rooms. I could embed my own QR code token in there, #Vesa, and make them into treasure hunts. I could embed documentaries about Egypt as well as the artwork somewhere in there. And it could have this whole theme of what you can access the art via a surrounding that is almost starting to be gamified. So that was the first version of it. Now this second iteration with Superworld is something else entirely in terms of its presentation, but I'm still not happy how we are going to launch it with the amount of gamification that is there. So I'm still looking for people. I'm constantly talking to coders. I'm constantly like trying to like, I'm not so inspired by money. I know that the money has come the further and further I innovate with things. And then those who invest into me now, their payoff is a slightly longer cycle than the sort of fast cycle. But what it can be in terms of its results in a while can also be very different than the fast flip cycle things. So I focus on building the foundation. I focus on making the spearhead expressions, experimenting with people is what could be cool. Like the car thing. It's like, this could be really cool to do, and it will help people. It will help the whole space. And let's see how it evolves.
So one thing I would like to add on how it's going to evolve. I mean, looking at what's happening now, Facebook just went out and said that they're potentially considering changing the name of their company because of what they're doing about creating the Facebook metaverse.
Yeah.
So that just says how significant the whole NFT space, the whole metaverse is going to become for how we live, how technology is going to change. Imagine Facebook, one of the biggest companies in the world, are considering to change their name because of the metaverse.
Unreal.
So that's unheard of.
Speaks to the time that we're living in right
so
now.
that's why people should, start to understand and learn about NFTs and learn about the metaverse, because it is the future.
Yeah. All right.
But I doubt that. Sorry, last comment though, this is why I find the 3.5 billion people not on the banking system and barely on Facebook more important than Mark Zuckerberg. Because I would say that it's unlikely that Zuckerberg is going to be giving legal rights for people to own a part of the Facebook metaverse.
Yeah, probably not.
Unlikely.
Probably a discussion for another time. So now, just to wrap it up, we always like to ask these rapid fire questions just to get the audience to know a little bit about you. That's a bit out there. So first question: do you have any hidden talents?
They're hidden. I don't know.
No crazy talent outside of the art space that that you have.
One thing that I've cultivated as a skill, I suppose, is that I met many people who I call glue, which is that they're very good at connecting people and ideas, but especially helping other people meet other people of, let's say, quality or like-minded synergies and things like that. I think that's become something that I'm increasingly good at, is to see the synergies in between people and introduce them and help them sort of achieve things.
All right, cool. If you weren't an artist, what would you be doing?
You'll be a rock star.
You look like one already.
I'd probably be... I wanted to be a rock star when I was a kid. But
you played guitar, right?
Yeah. But I think some sort of disruption. I think the common thing among crypto people is this whole thing about being genuinely enthused about innovation, helping the world in some sort of a way, trying to leave this place a little bit better than it was before you were here in some way. I think I'd be driven by something like that. I might be working in technology.
I could see that. Yeah, you've got that mindset. I can see that. All right, final question. What's your favorite restaurant in Dubai?
Actually, the one that I find myself hanging out, it's not so much even the restaurant. There are many much better restaurants, but it's the Wayne at Somnia, at the address Marina. It's their pool bar.
That's really cool.
So it's the shishas, and it's really decent food. It's nice drinks, and usually friends who sort of just hang out there. We were there last night till late. Again, just fascinating conversations and things like that. So that's the one.
All right, awesome. Vesa, it's been a pleasure to have you on here. People can follow you on your Instagram, right? What's your handle?
Yeah, the handle for Instagram and Twitter where I'm more active is Art by Vesa, Vesa. And then it's artforcrypto.com where you'll be able to find a lot more info.
We'll include your details in the show notes of our podcast. I hope you guys, give you a follow. I think, you're coming out with a lot of great stuff. I love your work as well. And you know what? We're looking forward to have you on the podcast in the future once, this sort of Tesla project really kicks off. I think it'll be really cool to have another discussion about that down the line.
It's not only Teslas, by the way. It's 55
cars.
different cars.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
100%. It's going to be super cool.
Yeah, so make sure you follow this godfather of NFTs. He's one of the original OGs. And tune into the Crypto Sheikhs podcast. Subscribe if you haven't. And check out heliconNFT.com.
Thank you all. Take it easy.
Thank you.